Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I have Todd Evans to the channel. How are you, Todd?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Always good to be here.
Absolutely. And Todd, we have got you into the show to talk about this album, The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. Now, this was released on the 1st of November, and Todd and I have deliberately taken a wee bit of time to actually get around to talking about it so it soaks in, because I'm a great believer that you shouldn't just review albums straight off the bat, like within a week or two. You've got to give
Right.
it a lot of listens and sometimes let it soak in. And I think 8 weeks is enough time that we can have a bit
I
of a
think so.
soak in and give our sort of opinions of this album. So this is the 14th Cure album, was released on the 1st of November. It was the first album in 16 years since 413 Dream. Um, the band is Robert Smith, Simon Gallup, Jason Cooper, Roger O'Donnell, and Reeves Gabrels. All the compositions of this album, Todd, are written by Robert Smith. So it's a bit different from 413, where it was attributed to The Cure. This is actually
Right.
Robert Smith. Let's go, bit by bit. Let's talk about the album cover. I'm going to
Okay.
talk about the aesthetics. So this is there was a video that came with Alone, and it was a slow reveal of this object, which is kind of like a statue or something. But when you initially saw it and it's rotating, it looked like a meteor, didn't it? And it was kind of a
Yeah.
slow reveal, and it was a nice counterpoint to the music itself, because Alone is a very slow reveal.
Yeah.
So, what do you think this album cover says? I just
Well, I wanted to say that this is something that I wish we saw more of. It's kind of old school to have an album release campaign start with an advanced single, a very advanced single that teases the artwork. And if you've been following the band on social media, like on Facebook, they've been for months. I don't know if it was months prior to the release, but they're still sort of doing it. They're still promoting the album, but they sort of revealed they revealed part of this image and not the whole thing, and then the video for Alone, sort of revealed some more. And when I first saw it, I was a little bit disappointed in its monochromatic, I guess. What's the word?
mm,
Monochromatic
mm,
nature of it. But once you actually get the stuff in your hands, it's really
mm,
beautiful. It's extremely thick cardboard, and I
mm.
bought the vinyl. I have the vinyl over there, and
Yep.
the CD. The CD booklet is made of really thick, like cardboard stock.
Mm.
And as soon as I had it in my hands, I totally changed my mind about it. And I absolutely really love it. It's not really like anything that I've seen before, which is difficult to do.
Yeah.
To come up with an album package that doesn't look at least a little bit like something else.
Yeah.
So I have to
It
tip my hat to them.
Absolutely. It is completely different to the rest of their catalog in regards to their album covers, because I mean, remember, a lot of their album covers are very blurry and
Hmm.
obscured, but this one more sharper. But to me, I'm wondering if it's saying this is a relic and we're going back to the past. It's like being archaeologists. Let's do a bit of a
Yeah.
dig, and it's harking back to our sounds, maybe a bit of the early stuff, bit of the mid-period stuff, and let's talk about now. So that was in my mind. And remember, like, when we look at music and we buy albums, it's a whole experience. We look at the cover, we look at the song titles, and it's a connection between sound, um, the album cover, the whole package. So I guess before we played that first song, we're trying to form in our mind, what's this going to be like, and what is this album cover telling us? So, sorry, a little bit of a preamble, but I think it's
Yeah.
important.
Well, one of the things that I think probably the most important thing that I'd like to say about this album is that The Cure spent some time in the beginning of this decade, in the 2000s, between 2000 and the release of 413 Dream. Robert Smith was saying a lot of things about The Cure. It was almost as if he was telling people, I don't really know what I want to do with this. He stripped it down to a three-piece. He got rid of Roger O'Donnell, and he stripped it down to just him and Jason Cooper and Simon Gallup. That I don't remember when that was. It was like 2004 or something like
Mm,
that. And then they added Coral Thompson back to it, another veteran of the band. And then it became that they didn't have a keyboardist. And then they toured without a keyboardist and triggering all the sounds on the keyboard songs on the guitar. And then when they made the self-titled album, I was going to look up this name and I forget. Is it Ross somebody, the guy who produced the self-titled album? Let me see if I can find his name. They had a guy produce that, and he was a producer of things that bands that weren't like The Cure. His name was Ross Robinson, and he produced Slipknot and Limp Bizkit and Sepultura and bands like that. And so it was almost as if The Cure were trying to either reinvent themselves or run away from what the heart of what they really were. And so when this came out, it was like The Cure are embracing being The Cure. And
yes.
this is something that I think is really important to know about this record before you start listening to it. It's not a rehash. It's not an attempt to make, in my eyes, it's not an attempt to make Disintegration over again. It's an attempt to be true to what The Cure is. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I find most welcoming about it.
Yeah. Well, I
He's
think
not
it just.
trying to say, I'm not going to do that again. He's saying,
Mm,
I'm going to do what's in my heart.
yeah, I think it distills a lot of the different sounds from previous albums. It's not sort of a typical of a Blood Flowers because I guess we did an episode, you and I, about Alone, and we were second guessing what the album was going to be. Was it going to be like
Yeah.
Blood Flowers and Disintegration? And we were putting on our inspector hats on and trying to second guess. Um, I guess my question to you: were your instincts right when you heard the album, based
They
on our
they
suspicions?
were. They were when I heard Alone and I heard the thick sound of the keyboards, I was like, okay, well, it sounds like they're going to do Blood Flowers, but it's gonna be a little lusher than that. And because
Very
Blood
much.
Flowers seems to me when you compare it to Disintegration, it feels a little stripped down. And
Mm,
it was pretty clear that, and I went to the tour too, so I heard a couple of other songs from the album. Couldn't remember them very well, but I did
mm,
witness them playing them, and I thought, okay, well, this is going to be lusher. So in that sense, I had it. I felt like I was close, but I didn't realize how the themes of getting older and there being, and when we go through the songs we can talk about this a little more, but there's a lot of really frank talk about aging
yeah,
and
absolutely.
about relationships and about one
Yeah.
song in particular about how some relationships you can't fix.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Now, sonically, I feel like it's a band or Robert's just doing what he wants to do because it's not the traditional song structure. A lot of the songs reveal themselves at a very slow rate. So, for
yes.
example, Alone, it's that clicks in at 6:53, and it's only around about 3 minutes where you have the first vocal line,
Yeah,
and nothing
322.
and nothing is forever. That's 6 minutes 53, 1 minute 55 before the vocals kicks in.
Hmm.
um, End song 10 minutes and 23, 6 minutes 20 before the vocal lines
Yeah.
kick in. um, I think, I don't know, it's that's a little divisive, with a lot of folks that I've spoken to, a lot of Cure fans. What's your views on that? I'm sort of 50-50 on it.
Well, I was reading today that this album got a lot of really great reviews, but one of the worst, really the only negative review it got was from a magazine in Europe where they said that it was too difficult to listen to because of how long it took the songs to get started. Now, that's a very pop music frame of mind. And I don't say that to
Mm,
be to insult people who like pop music because I do too. But when people were saying that when Alone came out and they were like, "Oh my God, it's three minutes until somebody says anything. Who does that?" And I thought to myself, well, prog rock, um, death metal. There are
mm,
there are a lot of different kinds of music where there's a really long intro. So
yeah.
so it wasn't surprising to me, but I could see how could be surprising to some people who don't listen to some of the darker genres.
But what of his contemporaries are doing that? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode. I'm thinking of those 80s bands. Who is doing this sort of stuff? Nobody.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a maverick that he's doing this style of music. So if you
Yeah,
think of
and
a
I think
yeah, if you think of a song and, like it has an introduction, a couple of bars, and into it, he's breaking the mold. He's moving it, the goalposts, right, pushing it right in.
well, yeah, I think it's indicative of the fact that he's doing what he wants to do. He's
Yes.
not letting anybody influence him. He's not, and I'm assuming that they made this record without any interference from anyone because it sounds like it.
So maybe he's the anti-pop star. Do you think it's deliberate? Maybe he's saying, I don't want to be played on pop radio. This is my style of music. I will do it the way I want to do. And if I want to write an 8-minute song and halfway through the vocal line comes in, that's fine. I think if you did a pie chart, I think he only sings on half of the album
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
it's
and
because the melody, the lyrics, the verses and the choruses are just pushed so far into the song. I think
yeah.
it's so unusual, and it could
Well,
it could be
it's
groundbreaking.
refreshing. Yeah, it's very refreshing because people tend to think, there's a lot of talk about how the music business has been deconstructed in that, oh well, there's singles, but there's not really singles that you can hold in your hand, and there's radio play, forget about it. All of that's in the past. And instead of, a lot of people of Robert Smith's generation are very distraught about that and will vocally, talk about how they're disappointed that the music business has changed and they don't know how to react to it. But the way Robert Smith reacted to it was, I'm just going to do what I want, and
Yeah. Well, I
it's going
think
to come out. Somebody plays it on the radio, fine. It's going to be something that people play in a streaming service, or they're going to buy the CD or whatever. And so there's no reason to force everything into some kind of a box like you used to. But the people used to do that. They used to say, well, you can't sell any if you don't start saying something within the first 20 seconds, you're not going to grab anybody's attention. And Robert Smith just kind of went,
yeah.
who needs
But
that?
but I was thinking you couldn't even do a radio edit because you know how
Yeah.
radio used to edit songs into fit into their format. You can't even do that because it's an intro, folks. It's not
Right.
the outro, and
Right.
it would be a really, where would you do it? So I think he's created something unique. He's a maverick, and I'm struggling, and I'm sure our commenters will say something, but I can't think of any of his contemporaries are structuring songs quite like him.
There are people who are you mentioned Tears for Fears. There are people who are creatively doing their arrangements to deliberately make something different. Like I think that last Tears for Fears album sort of does that. It wasn't what I expected from them, and it took me weeks to get used to it. And so there are people that are rethinking their approach and not just coming out and doing the formula, but this like takes it to a whole other level.
It takes it to the extreme because there are some. Okay, let's talk about End Song. So End Song, it leaves you anticipating the vocals, and it
Hmm.
keeps going and going and going, and it's finally there at 6 minutes, and you're kind of relieved. You just,
Yeah.
it's like the anticipation, and it's I don't know, it's sort of deliberate. It's like a payoff. Now it's really funny when you look at YouTube. There's a bit where it says the most played, and you can find out in each of these Cure songs where the vocals come in because that's where the most played is. It's like the peak.
The little
Yeah.
wave, yeah.
Yep. So, look,
But
yeah.
I was going to say, if you're going to talk about End Song now, this is as good a time as any for me to talk about the fact that one of the things I love about this record is that I have always been kind of negative about Jason Cooper because I feel like Boris Williams is really the ultimate drummer for The Cure. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Jason Cooper almost seems like he's trying to rock it up a little too much. And I think that he's gotten better through the years, but on this record, he just absolutely nails it. He's playing exactly the right thing for these songs. Exactly. It's not simpler, but there's something that is very it's perfectly matched to the atmosphere of the song. And in an end song, it's almost that his tom sound is almost Phil Collins-esque. I mean, it's just very it's very reminiscent of something that Phil would have played, but it's very much like The Cure. I mean, quite frankly, a lot like Boris Williams. And so,
Well, he's
yeah,
become
this
Boris,
whole
hasn't he?
album is like this.
He has. But look, he's copped a lot of crap over the years from fans, and just because he had such a different style of drumming.
Right.
Look, Robert Smith's no mug. He knew this guy's got talent, and he's
Yeah.
persevered. And if it didn't match his template of what he thought the Cure would be, he would have been long gone out of the band. So he
Right. Right.
persevered.
And by
And
the time he got to Bloodflowers, he was really fitting in really well.
absolutely. Now with End Song, I know we're starting a bit early. I think End Song is like a bookend to Alone. So it
It
starts with
is.
Alone, and folks, just check our show where we just concentrated on talking about that song. We went into a lot of detail. Alone is a very languid, in a good way, reveals itself. It's like an overture song. It draws you in, and 3 minutes halfway through, the vocals start. End song to me is like the bookend. It's like the
Yeah.
the end. It's epic. It swells, and then halfway through the song, Robert does his vocals. This is the closure, the end. But
Yeah. And
is it really the end? Is it really the
yeah,
end? Probably not.
lyrically, the song Alone ends with this is the end of every song we sing alone. And towards the very, very end of End Song, he says, left alone with nothing, the end of every song, left alone with nothing. And then, of course, the last word is nothing, which is fantastic and totally Robert Smith.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But and he's sort of sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but he's sort of in Alone, he's sort of teasing on the idea of how did I get so old? He's talking about hopes and dreams are gone, the end of every song. We were always sure that we would never change and it all stops and all that stuff. And in End Song, he just flat out says, how did I get so old? Basically. And boy, can I relate to that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, he's thinking about his mortality. Definitely, some very introspective lyrics. I mean, it's the same Robert Smith playbook on lyrics, but he just makes it compelling. Um,
Yeah.
I think the star of this show, other than Robert Smith, is Roger O'Donnell. The keyboard lines are just so beautiful.
Yeah,
These,
absolutely.
and I think a lot of the songs wrap around the keyboard and the synth washers. I think he is definitely so integral to the
Yeah.
sound of this band, and everything wraps around it. So,
And to me,
yeah,
people think of the of Disintegration as being the ultimate synth Cure album. I think this is. I think this is even better than Disintegration as far as that's concerned. And there are three songs, and I initially, when I wrote my notes, I initially called them piano-based, but it's almost like they have a piano foundation. Like the first
Mm,
thing you hear and the last thing you hear is the piano. And Nothing Is Forever, A Fragile Thing, and I Can Never Say Goodbye are all like that. They've got like a piano foundation and then everything builds on top of that, which
yeah.
it's just stunning to me.
Let's talk about a Nothing Is Forever. To me, it sort of echoes Boys Don't Cry, but a like slowed down version. It's kind of got the keyboards take the reins
Hmm.
of the song, and you got the guitars. They chug and push it along. But yeah, these wonderful classical gothic keyboard lines. It's just compelling.
Yeah, if I were forced to choose a favorite song on the album, it's probably that one. It's probably Nothing Is Forever. And I love albums that have a very strong song in the number two position. So so this really appeals to me.
Yeah. And then it follows the next track is a fragile thing. Again, it starts off with this nice, delicate keyboard line. The hi hat comes in, then you've got this thumping bass and this swinging beat of
Yeah.
because there's a lot of groove with Jason Cooper's drums.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. And it's funny, a friend of mine on the Blue Sky platform was talking about the only thing that they didn't like about the album was that it didn't have an upbeat, like lighthearted single. You know, like even Disintegration has like a pop song in it, and Wish has Friday I'm in Love. I think A Fragile Thing is probably the closest thing we get to that, and it's not far off. It's got that kind of bouncy swing to it. It's a narrative. You know, he's talking about, you know, he said and then she said and so
mm,
as far as these songs go, it's probably the lightest one. So I think that's as close as you get.
well, that was my initial reservation on the album because it took a long time before I grew to really, really like it. My initial first couple of spins, I thought the sonics were quite narrow and it was very dark, and I kind of missed the whimsy of a
Yeah.
love cats or a love song or something that bounces around. And you know, to be fair, even 8 weeks in, I think a small quibble is I would have liked a little bit more light. And
Yeah.
that's a common
Yeah.
thread with a lot of folks that I talk about this album. They said, I
Yeah,
really
that's that.
enjoy it, but I would just like a little bit of lightness.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I am finding that I'm finding a little bit of lightness the more I listen to it. But yeah, you expect that because you've always got that from The Cure.
Yeah. I
So
mean, your favorite album's Wish.
right.
And
So Friday I'm
so,
in Love. Yeah.
were you when you were listening to this album, were you waiting for a Friday I'm in Love or something that had that whimsy?
Kind of 50-50. I was, but I also took a look at it and thought I may not get that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Well,
wasn't disappointed when I didn't get it, but
he's going to release another album next year, Todd, and he said one of the songs that he's recorded for this next album is the saddest song he's ever written. So let's have to,
surprising that this isn't that it's not on this.
yeah.
So
Um, War Song. Wow. 4 minutes 17. Again, about 2 minutes 10, vocals come in. It starts off with this kind of sounds like an accordion or a melodeon, the chiming guitars, and then you've got that wonderful tribal drums of Jason
yeah,
and the keyboard stabs, the string stabs, the guitar, its distortion, it builds up. I think this may be my favorite song on the album. It's got a bit of anger and spite, and it's Robert
yeah,
Smith being a social commentator. And a lot of folk forget that it's not all about the personal relationship side. He is a social commentator. I mean, 413 Dream and The Cure and some of those later period albums, he'd talk about the Gulf War and what was happening in the
yeah.
world and how the world's all fucked up. He would throw a lyric like this, and War Song sounds contemporary and very relevant.
Yeah, and if he only talked about his own experience, he's had that, he's been married to the same woman for a long time and they're very happy together. So what would you get, if that's all he did? I'm sure it would be wonderful, but it would be, not the Cure. Yeah, my first impression of War Song was that, if this was on The Cure or on 413 Dream, we'd be talking about, oh my God, what a great song. We'd be like gushing over it because it almost I haven't heard a lot of people talk about War Song and either War Song or Drone No Drone. But man, lyrically, it's just absolutely stunning. It's basically just like, you know what? Things with some relationship, things are hopeless. It's like, we will always fight. And he
Mm,
actually says the words, there's no way out of this. So that's sometimes you feel like that. So I could see that as being very relatable. It's just
yeah,
like we have this relationship that we just can't fix it.
yeah. I think it's a wonderful song. And Drone No Drone, it kind of reminded me of some of the industrial sort of music that was coming out of the 90s, but it sounds contemporary.
Yeah.
You've got the heavy distorted bass. The bass is so distorted, you can almost hear the strings vibrate, like clanging. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you've got this kick ass drum. So this is where Jason gets the rock thing out. You know what I mean? He's a little bit less Boris and more the
Yeah.
Jason that, the early Jason.
Yeah, and it really works too. I mean, it really sounds great.
And the keyboard, you've got this percussion because piano is a percussion instrument. And Simon's just playing the single note, ding, 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 and it just all works beautifully. But to me, it's like an industrial song, but it doesn't sound dated. It sounds very contemporary.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
So
starts with that really unique bass sound, which I have to assume is maybe Robert's six-string bass because he's credited with playing six-string bass on it. Um,
not nice.
to me, Drone No Drone sounds a little bit like Fascination Street. That's what it reminds me of. The same kind of a song, same kind of a feel. And I really like that. Uh, and then also there's one part where he says down, down, down. And it almost sounds like in the song Hot, Hot, Hot on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, where he says, hey, hey, hey. It almost is a similar cadence. And I was amused by that. That didn't come to me until like couple of months,
Yeah,
just recently. I was just like,
yeah.
oh, that's kind of like hot, hot, hot. That's cool.
Well, I think it's unavoidable when you're well into your career that, and especially you haven't done an album for some time, that you do echo melodies or themes or other songs that you've done in the past. And I think
Yeah, and
this
I'm
is,
in no way saying that, he's ripping himself off or anything.
mm,
I'm not saying that.
no, I think, but he's definitely
And it took
echoing
me a
it.
while. I was like, what is that? What does that remind me of? I had to like
Mhm.
listen to other songs until I found it. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah. Your wife is a huge Cure fan. Does she groove on this album?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But she hasn't spent
As
as much time with it as me, but yes.
Yeah, would she rank it as highly as you do, or not so? I'm always interested to hear other people's views.
Probably. You're reminding me that she and I really need to talk about it a little more. It came out in November, so the holidays have been going on. So
Yeah.
maybe sometime soon we'll sit down and we listened to it. Actually think that we listened to it when we moved into a new house. We were putting our house together.
Mm,
But we should probably spend an evening
yeah.
go beginning to
My
end.
my wife is a casual Cure fan, and she likes some of it, but I think she's more of the disintegration era. It's just really interesting to see people that are fans or like the Cure casually, and this new material and how they, what their approach to it is.
Yeah,
Um,
my wife is an early Cure fan, so
hmm. I Can Never Say Goodbye. Now, I think this is the most heartfelt song because the background to this is that he was writing about his brother, Richard Smith, and just reading, doing a bit of research, who was 13 years older. He was a very strong influence on the band musically and on Robert, obviously. And this actually, like a lot of these songs, Todd, this actually premiered in a concert in Poland, October 2022. So, what do you think of this song? I think this is one of the most melancholy songs on
Yeah.
the album.
Well, one of the things that I really like about it is that it's another one that sort of has kind of a piano foundation to it. The synth pads are really thick and dark and sound like they have some distortion in them. And so it's a very sad sound for a very sad song. So I think that that's just wonderful and remarkable. Um, you know, I have not. I only have one sibling. I have a sister, and hopefully, I'm not going to lose her for many, many years. But I have heard people say that when they lose a sibling, that it hits different. It's a different kind of sorrow. And the closest thing I have to that I lost a cousin that I was sort of close to about 10 years ago. And it kind of, you sort of, it's one thing when you lose a parent or if you lose a spouse or something like that, but to lose a brother is I've heard people say who have lost brothers that it's a very different kind of sorrow. And you can really sort of feel that in this song. You almost sort of have a feeling like, did that really happen? And I think that's really touching, and I think that lyrically that's one of the highlights of the album. There are quite a few highlights, but that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best songs of the album, and it's a you know it's a truly great songwriter that can bring out these emotions in different people, and yeah, I think it's wonderful. It's not many tracks on the album. I don't know the exact time, but I tell you, there's not a moment wasted on this album, is there?
Yeah, 49 minutes, I think. I think it's just under 50 minutes. Uh, I'm
That's fine.
very I'm very grateful that it's only 8 songs. I've been listening to music to trying to pick an end of the year list. And I can't tell you how many albums I've listened to that have been 12, 13, 14, 15 tracks. And there's
Mm,
something about these tracks, especially with some of them being kind of long. I like that there's fewer of them. I like that there's only 8. I think it's just right. I hope that his companion pieces to this are also, not too. This one, I mean, if I had to say something negative about Disintegration, I would say it's about 2 songs too long.
yeah,
And that would be like really, really trying hard to find something negative to say about Disintegration. But I love that this is an 8-track album. I think that's the perfect length.
yeah. Where would you put it in the catalog ranking? I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
it's very. I hate to gush too much about it, but I'm just going to be honest here. It's very close to the top.
really.
Yeah, I think you could take Wish, Disintegration, and this, and they would be fighting it out
Wow, that's
in my
good. Yeah,
rankings. Yeah,
yeah. I
this is
think
exactly what I wanted them to do.
it's
So
top tier. I'm not sure where it would land, but it's definitely top tier. And it's just wonderful that you've got an artist in the later part of their career that can still put out quality and,
yeah,
and be
and
kind of
one of the
and
things,
relevant.
yeah, and one of the things about Robert Smith is that he sounds exactly the same. I mean, exactly the same as you expect him to sound. And there have been some albums by some people that I really admire where they've aged quite a bit. And David Gilmour comes to mind. David Gilmour sounds like a much older David Gilmour. It works in his favor, and it sounds his latest album, Luck and Strange, is absolutely beautiful. But he sounds like an older version of David Gilmour, and that's wonderful. I love the way it sounds. But Robert Smith sounds exactly the same. He
Yeah.
really
Look,
does.
they're one of those few bands that just can make melancholy sound wonderful and uplifting. There's
Mhm.
very few bands like that. I think Depeche Mode are the others that come to mind, but can make the pain and torture of relationships. And another thing that comes to mind about The Cure is that it, like, even though he's older, but he never, to me, I think he's still an adolescent at heart. that period of when you're 17 and 18 or very young, and all the things that seem maybe trivial to an outsider are the most important things, like in regards to relationships. And his lyrics seem to capture that moment. And that's why I think there's a lot of cross-generational fans, because the themes are timeless, aren't they?
Well,
But
yeah.
it's about a period of a person's life that's like 17 to 18, even though a lot of this album is about being mature and, where is the future and what beholds. But there's a lot of looking back and, that period of one's life.
Yeah, there's I think that that's kind of a characteristic of what people back in the day used to call alternative rock, alternative music. Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark is kind of the same way. You feel that you hear their current music and they're much older, but you still feel that young person's angst, and you feel that the young
Yes.
person's optimism for romance and stuff like that. And even though he's talking about, how did this happen? How did I get to be so old? Uh, a great example of that kind of thing is there's a Pet Shop Boys album that is my favorite, but a lot of people don't like. It's called Elysium. I think it came out in 2011 or 2012, something like that. And the whole album is about getting older. And unfortunately, they didn't really go back to doing that. They did that album, and then they moved forward by making, going back to what they usually do, to basically making dance music that's got some, really, beautiful elements in it. But Elysium is the only album that's about getting older, but it still has that kind of youthful optimism, even though, and that I feel that's how I feel about Songs of the Lost World, is that it's about getting older, but it still has the youthful optimism of what a Cure album usually has.
Well said. I don't think I can say much more to that. But that's the things, they say that the most, the biggest impression you have in regards to your musical life is when you're 17 and 18, those early years. And that's where you form your tastes for later in life. And I think that's all part of this. And The Cure is part of that experience. Well, there
Yeah,
you
there's
go.
yeah.
Go on.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that for most of us, I think that who are big music fans and big fans of the kind of this kind of music, is that you that part of your brain sort of stays the same. You're
Yeah. It,
you're longing to listen to music about those kinds of topics. Really, you don't really lose it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, as always, Todd, wonderful to have you on the channel.
Thank you.
Please, on YouTube World, I'm not going to mention the other channels, just put Todd Evans and you'll see every sort of channel that he's been on. He's a welcome part of this family, and there'll be plenty of shows in 2025 where we're just going to talk about stuff. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think of this album, your favorite songs, or maybe your favorite Cure album. We love reading your comments. But one thing's for sure, you'll see me and Todd talking more stuff pretty soon. Cheers and all the best.
Thank you, Peter. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.